As I woke up in my bed, I yawned and slowly rubbed the sleep from my eyes. It had been a few days since I had won the airsoft tournament, and I was still feeling proud and excited about the victory. I felt a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction as I thought about how hard I had worked to earn that gold trophy. As I lay in bed, listening to the sound of the birds chirping outside my window, I couldn't help but feel a little nostalgic for the tournament. It had been such an intense and thrilling experience, and I felt a little sad that it was all over and done with. But I also knew that the memories and the gold trophy would be a permanent reminder of my victory and accomplishments. I sat up in bed and stretched, feeling the familiar ache and stiffness in my muscles from the intense physical activity of the tournament. I remembered all the different strategies and tactics I had used to outmaneuver my opponents, and I couldn't help but smile as I thought about how awesome it had been to win. I turned my head to look over at my husband Gohan, who was still asleep beside me. He was lying on his back, his chest rising and falling with each steady breath. His handsome face was relaxed and peaceful in sleep, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of deep love and admiration for him. As I looked at Gohan sleeping next to me, I couldn't help but think back to the previous night. It had been a night of celebration for me, after I had won the airsoft tournament and been awarded a gold trophy. Gohan had been so proud and excited for me, and we had celebrated by making love in our bed. As I thought back to the passionate and intimate moment we had shared, I felt a stirring of desire in my belly. I watched Gohan's sleeping face and remembered the way he had touched me, his hands sliding over my skin and sending shivers of pleasure coursing through my body. As I watched him sleep, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude and love for him. He had always been so supportive and proud of me, and I knew that he was always there for me, no matter what. I was lucky to have him in my life, and I felt a deep sense of contentment and happiness as I thought about our life together. After a moment, I carefully slipped out of bed, being careful not to disturb Gohan. I didn't want to wake him up just yet, as he looked so peaceful and relaxed in sleep. I grabbed a robe from the back of the bedroom door and padded quietly out of the bedroom, heading towards the kitchen to start breakfast. As I walked through the quiet house, I felt a sense of peace and tranquility. The sunlight was just starting to stream through the windows, and I could hear the faint sound of birds chirping outside. I made my way into the kitchen and started to prepare breakfast, lost in my own thoughts and enjoying the quiet solitude. As I cracked eggs into a pan and set it on the stove, I thought again about the tournament and my victory. I felt a sense of pride and determination growing inside me, and I knew that I wasn't done competing yet. I was already determined to start training for the next tournament, eager to challenge myself and improve my skills even further. As I flipped the eggs in the pan, I heard the sound of footsteps coming down the hallway, and I turned to see Gohan walking into the kitchen, a sleepy smile on his face. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pulling me close and nuzzling my hair with his nose. I laughed and leaned back into his embrace, feeling happy and content. "Good morning," I said, turning my head to smile at him over my shoulder. "Sleep well? You look like you could use a few more hours." Gohan chuckled and nodded, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Yeah, I guess I could have slept a little longer," he said, resting his chin on my shoulder. "But I woke up and you weren't there, and I missed you." I felt a flutter in my chest at his words, and I smiled. "I didn't want to wake you up," I said. "You looked so peaceful sleeping. I figured I'd let you rest a little longer and make breakfast instead." Gohan nuzzled my hair again and planted a soft kiss on my neck. That's sweet of you," he said. "But I'd rather have woken up with you in my arms." I blushed at his words and leaned back into him, enjoying the feeling of his strong arms around me and the heat of his body against my back. "Well, I guess you'll have to get over it," I said, my voice teasing. "You can survive without cuddling for a few hours." Once the eggs were finished cooking, I turned off the burner and set them aside. Then I grabbed a package of bacon from the fridge and placed a few slices in the pan, setting the heat to medium. I watched the bacon bubble and sizzle as it cooked, the delicious smell filling the kitchen. As the bacon cooked, I began to set the table, grabbing plates and silverware from the cabinets. I could hear Gohan moving around behind me, getting coffee started and pouring juice for us to drink with breakfast. After a few more minutes, the bacon was finished cooking. I carefully removed it from the pan and placed it on a plate lined with paper towels to drain. The kitchen was filled with the mouth-watering smell of bacon and eggs, and my stomach growled in anticipation. Gohan placed a mug of coffee in front of me, the hot steam rising from the surface. I thanked him and took a sip, feeling the warmth and energy seeping into my body. He sat down across from me, and we began to eat our breakfast, the only sound in the kitchen the scraping of cutlery against plates, and the occasional comment about how good everything tasted. As we ate, I felt a sense of contentment and happiness. It was nice to start the day like this, enjoying a meal together, and talking about whatever came to mind. I watched as Gohan ate his food, admiring his strong jaw and kind smile, and feeling grateful that he was mine. After we finished eating, we sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, both of us enjoying the afterglow of a tasty meal. Finally, Gohan spoke up, breaking the silence. "So, what do you have planned for today?" he asked, taking a sip of his coffee. I shook my head, still a little sleepy from waking up early. "I haven't really made any plans yet," I said. "I'm thinking of laying low today. Maybe doing some laundry and cleaning up around the house. Nothing too exciting." As we sat at the table, enjoying our coffee and conversation, my phone suddenly buzzed on the counter behind me. I turned to look at it, a little surprised at the unexpected call this early in the morning. I got up from the table and walked over to the counter, grabbing my phone and looking at the screen to see who was calling. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, curious to see what the call was about. When I saw my sister Krampus's name pop up on the screen, I was surprised but also a little intrigued. We hadn't talked in a while, so I wondered what she wanted. I accepted the call and held the phone to my ear. As soon as I answered the call, I was greeted by the sound of my sister Krampus's lively and bubbly voice on the other end of the line. She sounded so excited and full of energy that I couldn't help but feel a little bit energized just hearing her speak. I chuckled a little and said, "Hey sis, what's got you so excited this morning? You sound like you just won the lottery or something." I was surprised to hear that my sister Krampus had won an airsoft tournament too. "Wait, seriously?" I said, sounding impressed. "You won an airsoft tournament? That's amazing! When did this happen?" My eyes widened as I listened to her explanation. "Yesterday?" I said, sounding a little shocked. "You won an airsoft tournament yesterday, and you didn't tell me until now? Why didn't you call me sooner to tell me the good news?" Krampus laughed on the other end of the line, sounding unapologetic about her tardy phone call. "I was too busy celebrating with my team and rubbing it in everyone's faces," she said, sounding pleased with herself. "But I knew you'd be just as excited as me, so I thought I'd call you first thing in the morning." I could hear the excitement and pride in my sister's voice, and I couldn't help but chuckle a little at her confidence. I was about to respond, but then she dropped another piece of information that caught me off guard. Krampus continued, giggling as she said, "Oh, and there's another reason why I didn't call you right away. Broly and I, well, let's just say we had a little celebration of our own last night, if you know what I mean." I could feel my eyes widen again as I processed her words, and I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I knew that my sister could be blunt and unapologetic, but I hadn't been expecting her to be quite that upfront about her intimate activities with her husband. I cleared my throat a little, trying to shake off my surprise. Wow," I said, sounding a little flustered. That's certainly something. Congratulations on the tournament win and the celebration with Broly, I guess." Krampus laughed again, sounding completely unashamed and unapologetic. "Hey, it was a big win, and we were really excited," she said. "Celebrations sometimes get a little wild, you know? But enough about me. How's your morning going? Exciting as mine?" I shook my head a little, still a little shocked at my sister's unashamed openness about her intimate activities. No, not exactly," I said. "I've just been hanging out at home with Gohan. We had breakfast a little while ago, and now we're just relaxing and talking." As we continued to chat, my sister Krampus then mentioned a new airsoft event that was going to take place later that day at the beach. She explained that it was going to be a reenactment of the Normandy landings from World War II, and that the event started at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I perked up at the mention of the event. "Wait, really?" I said, sounding interested. "There's an airsoft event later today? And it's themed like Normandy? That sounds cool as hell." Krampus continued, sounding hopeful and excited. "I really want to participate in the event, since the US allies stormed the beaches of Normandy, and you know how much we love our country. I was wondering if you'd be interested in joining me. It would be so much fun, and I know we'd kick some serious ass together." I felt a ripple of excitement and patriotism flow through me. I had to admit, the idea of participating in a reenactment of such a historic event was definitely appealing. Plus, the thought of teaming up with my sister and kicking some ass together was too good to pass up. I chuckled and said, "Well, when you put it like that, how could I say no? Count me in. It sounds like a blast. I can't wait to storm that beach together with you." Krampus let out a cheer of excitement, sounding thrilled. "Yes, I knew you'd be down for it. This is going to be amazing. We're going to kick some ass and have a blast doing it." After ending the call with my sister Krampus, I felt a rush of excitement and pride coursing through me. I couldn't believe we were actually going to participate in an airsoft event themed after the Normandy landings. The thought of storming the beach with my sister by my side, fighting for our country's honor, was making me feel pumped up and energized. I walked back over to the table where Gohan was still sitting, feeling a grin spreading across my face. "Hey, you won't believe what just happened," I said, sounding excited and a little breathless. Gohan looked up as I spoke, a curious smile on his face. "What happened?" he asked, sounding a little intrigued by my enthusiasm. I took a deep breath and leaned against the table, still feeling a little winded from the adrenaline rush. "Well, my sister Krampus just called me," I said. "She told me about this airsoft event that's taking place at the beach this afternoon. It's a reenactment of the Normandy landings from World War II, and she wanted me to join her in participating." Gohan raised an eyebrow, looking a little surprised. "The Normandy landings, huh?" he said. "That sounds pretty intense. Are you sure you're up for it?" I nodded, feeling determined and excited. "Hell yeah, I'm up for it," I said, grinning. "It's gonna be so badass. Can you imagine it? Storming the beach with Krampus by my side, fighting for our country's honor." Gohan chuckled, looking amused by my enthusiasm. "You really seem fired up," he said, a little smile on his face. "I haven't seen you this excited for something in a while." I felt a little sheepish at his observation, but I couldn't deny that he was right. I was feeling hyped up and energized at the thought of this event, and I wasn't sure where all the excitement was coming from. Gohan leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment. "You know, it's kind of endearing to see you this excited," he said, sounding a little affectionate. "You're usually so calm and stoic, but whenever you get passionate about something, it's cute." I felt my cheeks redden a little at his words, but I tried to play it off. "Hey, I'm not cute," I said, sounding a little defensive. "I'm a badass, remember?" Gohan chuckled again, sounding amused by my attempt to act tough. "Oh yeah, you're a total badass," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you're also cute when you're all fired up like this." I huffed, feeling a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "Shut up," I said, trying to sound annoyed but failing. Deep down, I secretly loved when he called me cute, even though I would never admit it. As I pouted and huffed at Gohan's teasing, he suddenly leaned forward and planted a soft kiss on my lips. I was caught off guard by the unexpected gesture and froze for a moment before melting into the kiss. As we kissed, I felt all my previous irritation and frustration melt away, replaced by a feeling of warmth and contentment. It was like all my worries and stresses just faded away in his embrace, and all that mattered was the feeling of his lips against mine. The kiss was slow and gentle, full of tenderness and affection. After a few moments, we finally pulled away, both of us slightly breathless. I looked up at Gohan, feeling a little dazed and flushed. He looked back at me with a soft smile, his eyes shining with warmth and affection. After our kiss, Gohan and I cuddled together for the rest of the day, lazily lounging on the couch and enjoying each other's company. We talked, laughed, and reveled in the feeling of being close to each other. As the day went on, Gohan and I also found other ways to entertain ourselves. We did some gardening in the backyard, tending to the flowers and vegetables that we had planted together. We also played some soccer in the front yard, laughing and teasing each other as we kicked the ball back and forth. After we got tired from the game, we came back inside and decided to switch on the TV and watch a movie while eating some pizza for lunch. We sat together on the couch, eating pizza and watching a movie. I felt cozy and comfortable, cuddled up beside Gohan and enjoying the feeling of his arm around my shoulders. The film was lighthearted and humorous, making us both laugh and smile as we watched. As we watched the movie, I suddenly caught a whiff of something fragrant and sweet coming in through the open window. I lifted my head a little, inhaling deeply and recognizing the scent of the blooms from the garden we had been tending to earlier. I smiled and turned to Gohan, taking in another deep breath of the floral aroma. "Can you smell that?" I asked, sounding a little dreamy. "The flowers we planted are blooming. They smell so good." Gohan nodded, also inhaling the fragrance of the blooms. "Yeah, they do smell nice," he said, sounding a little surprised. "I didn't realize they would smell this strongly. It's like a mini garden inside the house." As I sniffed the air again, enjoying the scent of the flowers, Gohan suddenly surprised me by reaching over and picking a marigold flower from a potted plant in the room. He held the vibrant orange flower out to me with a small smile, looking a little shy but also determined. I gasped a little as he held out the flower to me, feeling touched by the unexpected gesture. I took the marigold from him, feeling its soft, velvety petals against my fingers as I brought it to my face to inhale its sweet, earthy scent. I smiled at Gohan, feeling suddenly very emotional. "Thank you," I said, my voice a little shaky. "It's beautiful. You didn't have to get me a flower, but I love it." Gohan shrugged a little, looking a little bashful. "I just wanted to do something nice for you," he said, sounding a little sheepish. "I know you love gardening, so I thought you'd appreciate a flower from your own plants." I felt a wave of affection for Gohan wash over me, feeling touched by his thoughtfulness. I reached over and took his hand in mine, intertwining our fingers and squeezing his hand gently. Without thinking, I flung my arms around Gohan's neck, hugging him tightly. I buried my face in his shoulder, feeling a wave of emotion welling up inside me. I clung to him for a moment, feeling safe and comforted in his embrace. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close and rubbing his hands soothingly up and down my back. As the clock struck 3 p.m., I reluctantly pulled away from Gohan's embrace. We both knew that it was time to get ready for the event at the beach. I felt a mixture of excitement and nerves at the thought of the upcoming reenactment, and I knew it was time to suit up and head out. We quickly changed into more practical and outdoor clothes, grabbing some supplies we thought we might need for the event. Then, we hopped into the car and drove to the beach, feeling both excited and anticipation for the afternoon ahead. The drive to the beach was relatively short, and we soon arrived at the location for the event. The beach was already bustling with activity, with groups of people in vintage World War II clothing and carrying fake guns scattered throughout the sand. I couldn't help but stare in awe as we approached the beach. There was a huge group of volunteers there, all dressed in US World War II soldier uniforms and carrying airsoft versions of the weapons from that era. They looked incredibly realistic and detailed, and even at a distance they looked convincingly like the real thing. I could feel my excitement building as we walked closer, taking in the sight of the volunteers practicing and preparing for the event. The attention to detail and authenticity was impressive, and I found myself getting caught up in the thrill of the experience already. As we walked further onto the beach, I suddenly spotted my sister Krampus among the large group of volunteers. She was dressed in a vintage US soldier uniform, complete with a helmet and canteen. She was chatting and laughing with a few other volunteers, looking happy and energized about the event. I couldn't help but feel a wave of pride and affection for my sister as I saw her there, dressed up and getting into character for the reenactment. I nudged Gohan and pointed her out, feeling my excitement build even more at the thought of participating with her. Gohan followed my gaze and spotted Krampus among the volunteers, also looking impressed and amused at her outfit and enthusiasm. We made our way through the crowd of volunteers and approached my sister Krampus. She noticed us approaching and waved, a wide grin spreading across her face. Krampus called out to us as we got closer, sounding excited to see us. "Hey, you guys made it," she shouted, sounding a little breathless. "I'm so glad you're here." Krampus immediately abandoned the volunteer she was talking to and launched herself at me, wrapping me in a tight hug. I laughed and hugged her back, feeling a wave of affection and excitement as we embraced each other. Krampus squeezed me tightly, sounding excited and a little winded. "I'm so pumped for this," she said, sounding enthusiastic. "It's gonna be so much fun to reenact the Normandy landings together." Gohan then spoke up, sounding supportive and enthusiastic. "I'm gonna go find Broly and sit in the bleachers to cheer you girls on," he said, smiling at us both. "Good luck out there." I smiled back at Gohan, feeling grateful for his encouragement and support. "Thanks, Gohan," I said, feeling touched by his thoughtfulness. "We're gonna need all the luck we can get." Gohan leaned in and pressed a quick kiss to my cheek, his lips warm and soft against my skin. I blushed a little, feeling a rush of affection for him. Then he turned and headed towards the bleachers, giving us both a little wave as he walked away. Krampus watched him go, giving him a wave and a grin before turning back to me. "Seems like you have a supportive boyfriend," she teased, sounding amused and a bit mischievous. I rolled my eyes playfully at Krampus's comment, feeling a little bashful at the implication. "I guess you could say that," I replied, trying to sound coy. "He's definitely been encouraging me a lot lately." With Gohan settled into the bleachers, I turned my focus back to the event at hand. I and Krampus joined the group of volunteers who were now gathered in formation and waiting for further instructions from the event coordinators. The coordinators leading the event then instructed the group to start walking down the beach, signaling the start of the reenactment. The group of volunteers, still in formation, started to march down the beach, some of them carrying fake guns and others carrying other props to mimic the actual Normandy landings. As we marched, I felt a sense of anticipation and excitement building within me. It was surreal to be walking down the beach, dressed in vintage World War II garb, surrounded by other enthusiasts who were also fully immersed in the experience. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, and I found myself getting more and more pumped up as we got closer to the simulated battle. After walking down the beach for a while, we eventually reached an area that had been set up to represent the Normandy landings. There were several boats lined up, looking like the ones that had been actually used during the historical event. They looked incredibly realistic and detailed, and I couldn't help but feel impressed by the attention to detail the event coordinators had put into the setup. Krampus and I exchanged a glance, both of us looking impressed and excited at the sight of the boats. "Wow, they really went all out," Krampus murmured, sounding impressed. "Those boats look just like the ones from the actual Normandy landings." I nodded in agreement, feeling my excitement starting to build even more. "Yeah, this is incredible," I said, sounding awed. "I can't believe we get to reenact such an important moment in history with these amazing props and setup." The coordinators instructed us to board the boats, and we did so in an orderly fashion. We climbed into the boats, the fake guns and other props in our hands. I climbed into a boat alongside Krampus, feeling a slight mix of excitement and nervousness as we got settled into our positions. As we sat in the boats, the coordinators explained the plan for the reenactment and gave us some last-minute instructions. They told us how we would be landing on the beach and simulating the actual battle that took place during the Normandy landings. The instructor then instructed us on how to proceed once we reached the battlefield. "When you reach the battle zone, keep your heads down as if the enemy forces have spotted you and are firing at you," he said, sounding gruff and authoritative. "We'll have people on the beach simulating the gunfire and explosions, so act like you're being shot at." I nodded, feeling a sudden rush of adrenaline at the thought of pretending to be under fire. I looked around at the other volunteers in the boat, noticing that some of them seemed a little nervous but also excited at the prospect of the battle simulation. The boats began to pull away from the shore, each boat filled with a group of volunteers all in character for the reenactment. The water lapped gently against the sides of the boats as we moved away from the beach, the sound of the waves mingling with the occasional instruction from the coordinators. I looked around at my fellow volunteers as we moved further out into the water, noticing that many of them were now fully in character, their faces set and determined as they clutched their fake guns and prepared for the simulated battle. The boats continued their journey along the shoreline, turning east as instructed. The ride over was a bit rough, with the waves causing the boats to bounce up and down a bit. But we were all too hyped up to notice the anticipation of the reenactment building with each passing minute. During the boat ride, Krampus and I chatted a bit, both of us sounding excited and a little nervous about the impending reenactment. We talked about what we were looking forward to and what we were a bit apprehensive about. The wind whipped at us as we moved through the water, but the adrenaline coursing through our veins kept us warm and focused on the task at hand. Krampus chuckled. "I can't believe we're actually doing this." "It's so surreal," she said, sounding a bit awed as she looked around the boat. "I mean, we're in the middle of the water, dressed like World War II soldiers ready to reenact a major historical event. It's insane." I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. "I know what you mean," I said, smiling at her. "It's like we've stepped back in time or something. I feel like I'm in an action movie or something." As we talked, the conversation eventually turned to our husbands. I couldn't help but gush a little about Gohan, feeling proud and affectionate as I talked about him. Krampus listened, sounding a bit amused and indulgent, then started speaking about her own husband, Broly. "I still can't believe how strong and amazing Broly is," she said, sounding a bit dreamy and reverent. "He can lift whole cars and buildings without breaking a sweat, and he's always so protective and caring towards me. He's a real sweetheart, but he can also be a bit of a goofball sometimes. I love him so much." I laughed at her description of Broly, feeling a mix of amusement and envy at how whipped she sounded for her husband. "Sounds like you got yourself a real badass there," I teased, sounding a little envious. Krampus huffed out a laugh, sounding both amused and proud. "Yeah, he's definitely a badass," she said. "But that's part of what makes him so great. He's got a soft side too, though. He gets all mushy and cute with me sometimes, especially when he's feeling particularly affectionate." Krampus then proceeded to talk about her husband Broly, specifically about his physical attributes. "Let me tell you," she said, looking a bit smug and leering, "he's got a real monster down there. I mean, he's freaking huge. I always knew he was packing, but I didn't know he was that packing. You know what I mean?" I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I knew Broly was a big guy, but I didn't know he was that big. "Oh my God, really?" I asked, sounding incredulous and a bit envious. Krampus waggled her eyebrows, looking even more smug. "Oh yeah," she said, sounding a bit cheeky. "Big enough that I feel like I'm being impaled every time he gets on top of me." My eyes widened and my mouth dropped open at her TMI statement. "Oh my God," I said, sounding flabbergasted and a little shocked. "That's a lot of information. I mean, good for you guys, but TMI, sister." Krampus laughed, sounding unrepentant. "Hey, you asked," she said, grinning. "Besides, I'm just bragging about my man." I couldn't help but roll my eyes, feeling a little envious, but also amused by her audacity. "Yeah, you're definitely bragging," I said. "But I guess I would be too if I had a husband like Broly." I then proceeded to talk about my own husband, Gohan, specifically about his physical attributes. "Gohan's no slouch in the size department, let me tell ya," I said, sounding a little smug and proud. "He's bigger than I expected, and sometimes he can be a little too passionate, especially when he's in his Super Saiyan form. Those Saiyan hormones can go wild, I tell you." Krampus raised her eyebrows, sounding a bit surprised and impressed. "Oh, really?" she asked, sounding a bit envious. "I wouldn't have guessed that about Gohan. He looks like such a nice, mild-mannered guy." I chuckled, feeling a little smug. "Yeah, he is a nice guy," I said. "But when things get hot and heavy, he can get a little intense." And let me tell you, his stamina is off the charts. Probably another benefit of those Saiyan genetics. Krampus laughed, sounding both impressed and a little jealous. Lucky you, she said, sounding a bit envious. But I guess I can't talk, since Broly's no slouch in the stamina department either. That man can go for hours, if you know what I mean. I blushed at her implication, feeling both a bit amused and embarrassed by her candor. Wow, I didn't need that much detail, I said, sounding a little sheepish. But I get what you mean. I guess we both got ourselves some real stallions, huh? Krampus nodded sagely, sounding satisfied yet a little smug. Yep, we definitely lucked out, she said. Good thing we snagged them before anyone else could. They are some real catches, and I feel pretty proud to have landed someone like Broly. The conversation about our husbands took a back seat as we focused on the reenactment once more. The instructor's voice then interrupted our chatter, yelling for us to get down in the boat. Okay, everyone, get down in the boat. We're approaching the simulated battlefield. The volunteers all complied, crouching down and hiding behind the sides of the boats as instructed. Krampus and I did the same, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness as we drew closer to the simulated battlefield. I could feel my heartbeat quicken as the boats approached the area where the simulated battle would begin. The wind whipped at our faces and the waves lapped against the sides of the boats, adding to the sense of urgency and tension. I glanced over at Krampus, noticing that she looked a bit nervous, but also excited. We both knew that once we got to the battlefield, the real adrenaline would kick in and the battle simulation would start in earnest. As we reached the battlefield, we heard a flurry of noise all around us. The coordinators and other organizers of the event had set up speakers that were playing war sounds and sound effects, making it sound as if we were really in a battle zone. At the same time, a group of volunteers playing the role of the enemy army forces were firing their airsoft World War II guns from within fake bunkers that had been constructed to mimic the ones used in Normandy. The sound of the guns firing and the war sounds filled the air, adding to the sense of realism and urgency. I felt a rush of adrenaline course through my veins, and I could see that Krampus looked energized and ready to go as well. The front door of the boat suddenly opened, signaling that it was time for us and the other volunteers to exit the boat and start the battle simulation. The coordinator in charge yelled out a command. Go, go, go! The volunteers, including Krampus and I, quickly clambered out of the boat and splashed into the waist-deep water, the cold liquid feeling a bit shocking against our legs. We then started running towards the simulated battlefield, our fake guns clutched tightly in our hands as we charged towards the enemy forces. As we ran, we could hear the sound of gunfire all around us, the BBs flying through the air as the other volunteers simulated the battlefield. We had to duck down to avoid being hit by the fake gunfire, which added an extra layer of danger and excitement to the simulation. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I ran, the adrenaline surging through my body and making me feel both invincible and terrified at the same time. I could hear Krampus panting beside me as she ran, sounding a bit winded but also hyped up on adrenaline. We dug into the sand along the beach, creating small trenches to protect ourselves from the gunfire and give us a chance to fire back. The sand was loose and difficult to dig into, but we managed to create shallow but effective trenches that allowed us to fire our fake guns at the enemy forces. The volunteers playing the enemy forces fired at us from their bunkers, the BBs flying through the air and landing all around us. I heard some of the other volunteers cry out as they were hit, signaling that they had been taken out by the enemy fire. As we fired back at the enemy forces, we could hear the sounds of volunteers pretending to be shot and collapsing onto the beach, acting out their roles as casualties of war. It was both surreal and a little disturbing to see people playing dead and pretending to be wounded, but it added to the realism of the simulation. Some of the volunteers did their death scenes incredibly convincingly, playing up the drama and making it look as if they had been hit by real gunfire. Others were less into it, just collapsing to the ground and pretending to be dead. Regardless, it all added to the intensity and atmosphere of the simulation. I continued firing my gun at the enemy forces, trying to take out as many simulants as I could. I could hear Krampus firing her gun beside me, her face set in a fierce and determined expression as she focused on the battle. Just then, I felt a sharp pain in my side as a BB hit me, making me cry out in surprise. I stumbled a bit, feeling a wave of adrenaline and shock wash over me as I realized that I had been hit by the enemy fire. I clutched my side as the pain from the BB wound hit me. It wasn't a real bullet, of course, but it still stung like hell. I gritted my teeth and called out, "Medic!" One of the coordinators playing a medic then jogged over to me, crouching down next to me as she pretended to examine my wounds. She asked, sounding a little too professional as she got into character, "How badly are you hit, soldier?" I groaned a little, playing up the role of the wounded soldier. "Got me in the side," I said, wincing a bit for effect. "It's not too bad, but it stings like hell. Can you help me get patched up?" The medic nodded, pretending to rifle through her bag as she looked for the necessary supplies to patch me up. She then pulled out some gauze and proceeded to wrap it around my side, making it look as if she was really treating my wound. As she bandaged me up, I had to admit that she was really good at playing the part. She was super professional but also kind, making sure I was comfortable and that the gauze wasn't too tight. It was almost like having a real medic tending to my wounds. When she was done, I sat up and looked down at my side, seeing the fake bandage wrapped around my torso. It looked pretty realistic, and I had to admit that I was impressed by the effort that the coordinators had put into making the simulation as real as possible. The medic then patted my arm and gave me a small nod. "You're all set, soldier," she said, sounding satisfied. "Just take it easy for a bit and let that wound heal. You did good out there today." I nodded and thanked her, feeling a wave of gratitude and respect for the coordinators and volunteers who had put so much time and effort into making the simulation as realistic as possible. I then slowly stood up, feeling a little shaky but also excited by the adrenaline high that the simulation had given me. Krampus stayed by my side, keeping an eye on me and protecting me from any further enemy fire. She also continued to fire her gun at the enemy forces, shooting at them with determination and precision. We both continued firing at the enemy forces, our guns firing off a constant stream of BBs. Krampus was a real pro, firing with accuracy and concentration as she took out enemy after enemy. I was pretty impressed by her skills, and I thanked her silently for watching my back. As we fired at the enemy forces, we could hear the sound of them being taken out as our BBs hit them. It was a mix of satisfying and creepy, hearing the sounds of fake death and injury played out in front of us. As we continued to fire at the enemy forces, suddenly we heard something that made us pause. The sound of our husbands clapping and cheering us on. We both turned in surprise, seeing Gohan and Broly standing a few feet away, clapping and applauding us with big grins on their faces. Despite the fact that we were still in the middle of the simulation, seeing our husbands cheering us on made us feel warm and fuzzy inside. It was nice to know that they were there, watching and supporting us as we played the game. After a moment, we both nodded to each other and then charged out of our sand trench, joining the rest of the volunteers as they advanced up the beach towards the enemy forces. We continued the simulation, running across the beach towards another trench. The ground was soft and uneven, making it difficult to run and keep our balance as we moved. However, the adrenaline rush kept us going, and we managed to reach the next trench in good time. The trenches looked pretty realistic, with sandbags and other simulated obstacles placed strategically to give the volunteers some semblance of cover and protection. We quickly ducked into the trench and took cover, waiting for further instructions from the coordinators. Once we were in the trench, we both took up firing positions and started firing our simulated guns at the enemy bunkers. The sounds of gunfire filled the air as we shot at the targets, the BBs flying through the air and making a satisfying thunk against the bunkers. We continued firing at the bunkers, trying to take down as many as we could. The coordinators had done a great job with the setup, making the bunkers look and feel realistic. It was almost like we were really in the heat of a battle, fighting for our lives. As we fired at the bunkers, we could hear the sound of our BBs hitting the targets. It was a satisfying feeling, knowing that we were making a dent in the enemy forces. We high-fived each other, feeling like badasses as we continued firing at the simulated bunkers. We could hear the coordinators screaming out instructions to the volunteers, telling us to hold our positions and keep firing. It was chaos on the battlefield, with simulated gunfire and explosions going off all around us. But we both felt energized and alive, the adrenaline coursing through our veins as we continued the simulation. As we continued firing at the bunkers, we could hear the sounds of simulated death and injury all around us. Volunteers were pretending to be hit and falling to the ground in dramatic fashion, making the simulation feel all the more real and intense. After a while of firing at the bunkers, we both ducked down low in the trench to catch a breather. We were feeling hot and sweaty under our gear, and our throats were dry from yelling and panting. We both took our canteens out and took a few big swigs, relishing the cool water as it hit our parched throats. We sat there for a moment, letting the water cool us down and giving us a chance to catch our breath. It was nice to have a break from the action, even if it was only for a few minutes. But we both knew that we would have to get back to the simulation soon, and we were both excited despite our fatigue. After taking a few moments to rest and hydrate, we both got back to firing at the enemy. We continued attacking the simulated bunkers, feeling energized and focused as we took out more targets with our simulated guns. We could hear the coordinators yelling out instructions and encouraging us to keep up the good work, adding to the feeling of being in the heat of a real battle. We were both in the zone now, firing at the targets with precision and determination. We continued firing at the enemy bunkers, feeling more and more confident with each hit we landed. We felt like real warriors, charging headfirst into battle and taking out our enemies one by one. After a few more minutes of intense fighting, we heard the coordinators call out that the last enemy soldier volunteer was down. We both grinned and high-fived each other, feeling a mixture of relief and pride that we had helped to win the simulation. We looked around at the simulated battlefield, seeing the destroyed bunkers and the volunteers lying on the ground, pretending to be dead or wounded. It was a surreal sight, seeing the results of our efforts and feeling the aftermath of the battle. We looked towards the bleachers and saw our husbands clapping and cheering for us along with the rest of the audience. Seeing our husbands there, supporting us and being proud of us, made us feel warm and fuzzy inside. We couldn't help but smile at the sight, feeling touched and grateful that they had come to watch us play. It was nice to have their support, even if it was just for a silly simulation. We stood there for a moment, soaking up the applause and cheers from the audience. It was a nice feeling, knowing that we had put on a good show and that our husbands were proud of us. We both gave them a quick wave before turning back to the coordinators to see what was next. Once the simulation was over, all the volunteers that had been killed got up and both groups came together to shake hands and say good game. It was a friendly gesture, showing sportsmanship and respect for each other and the game they had just played. We both shook hands with the other volunteers, feeling a sense of camaraderie and friendship with them. Despite the fact that we had all been firing at each other just a few minutes ago, there was no hard feelings. We all had a good time and respected each other for playing the game. After the volunteers shook hands and said good game, the coordinators signaled that it was time for the awards ceremony. We both started making our way towards the stage, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness as we wondered who would win which awards. We both felt a surge of pride and happiness when the group was announced as the winners, feeling proud to have been part of such a strong and effective team. But then the announcer called out our names and said that we had earned special gold trophies for our individual performance and effort. We both gasped in shock and happiness, feeling incredibly touched and grateful for the recognition. We both walked up to the stage and accepted our trophies, feeling a mixture of gratitude and disbelief that we had won such a high honor. We looked out at the crowd and saw our husbands cheering and applauding, their pride and excitement for us clear on their faces. We both smiled and waved at our husbands, feeling incredibly happy and thankful in that moment. It was a moment we would never forget. The sense of pride and accomplishment we felt as we held our trophies and received recognition for our hard work and effort in the simulation. As we left the stage, we both felt a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. We knew that the simulation had been just a game, but the feeling of winning and being recognized for our efforts was all too real. We both couldn't help but feel a little bit proud of ourselves for doing so well in the game. As we walked off the stage, we were quickly enveloped by our husbands in hugs and kisses. Both Gohan and Broly were incredibly proud of us and showered us with affection and praise for our performance in the simulation. We both blushed and giggled a bit, feeling shy and a little overwhelmed by their enthusiastic support and affection, but we also felt incredibly happy and grateful for their love and support, knowing that they were our biggest fans and cheerleaders in life. They both hugged us close, ruffling our hair and giving us little kisses on the forehead and cheeks. We both leaned into their embrace, feeling loved and protected by their strong arms around us. We both soaked up their love and affection, feeling warm and fuzzy inside. It was moments like these that reminded us of how lucky we were to have husbands who cared for us so deeply and supported us in everything we did. After the award ceremony was over, we said our goodbyes to the coordinators and other volunteers and made our way back to our car. We both felt exhausted and satisfied after the intense but exciting day, and we couldn't wait to get home and relax. As we were getting ready to leave, we both said goodbye to Broly and Krampus Fexa. Gohan and Broly gave us one last hug, both looking a little sad to see us go, but also happy that we had a great time at the event. As we said our final goodbyes, I hugged my sister tight and whispered, "That was so much fun, right? It was awesome doing an airsoft event based on a historical event together." She smiled and nodded in agreement, squeezing me back tightly. We both understood how special moments like this were, getting to share a new experience together and enjoying it even more because it was something we both loved. It was moments like these that made our sister bond even stronger, knowing that we both had each other's backs no matter what. We finally let go of each other and took a step back, feeling a bit sad that the day was over, but also excited to plan the next event we could do together. We made a promise to each other to keep doing fun activities like this in the future, knowing that it would only strengthen our bond as sisters. After we said our final goodbyes to Broly and Krampus Fexa, we both made our way to our car. Gohan opened the passenger door for me, and I climbed inside, feeling exhausted but also satisfied from the day's events. We both buckled up and Gohan started the car. We were silent for a few moments as we began the drive home, both of us feeling a mixture of tiredness and contentment. I leaned against the seat and closed my eyes, enjoying the feeling of being in a warm and comfy car with my husband beside me. After a short drive, we finally arrived at our home. Gohan parked the car in the driveway and we both got out, stretching our limbs and yawning as we made our way up to the front door. I unlocked the front door and we both walked inside our home, feeling the relief of being in our familiar surroundings. I closed the door behind us and flipped on the lights, illuminating our cozy living room. We both headed upstairs to the bathroom, feeling the need to wash off all the sweat and dirt from the day's events. I turned on the shower valve and waited for the water to warm up while Gohan undressed. We both undressed and stepped into the shower, feeling the warm water cascading over our bodies. We both sighed in relief as the water washed away the grime and tiredness from the day, feeling refreshed and relaxed. We took our time in the shower, enjoying each other's presence and the feeling of the warm water on our skin. We both took turns washing each other's backs and hair, enjoying the intimate moments together. We eventually finished up our shower and climbed out, wrapping ourselves in fluffy towels and drying off. We both felt refreshed and relaxed, ready to unwind and prepare for bed. After getting dried off, we both put on our favorite pajamas, the soft fabric feeling comfortable against our skin. We both crawled into bed and settled under the covers, feeling the tiredness of the day finally catching up to us. We both snuggled up against each other, feeling the warmth of each other's bodies and the softness of the sheets. We both took a moment to bask in each other's presence, feeling incredibly grateful to have each other in our lives. I nuzzled my head into the crook of Gohan's neck and he wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close against his chest. We both let out content sighs, feeling safe and secure in each other's embrace. We both closed our eyes, and soon we were both drifting off to sleep. We both slept soundly and deeply that night, wrapped up in each other's arms and feeling at peace. The events of the day were still fresh in our minds, but we both knew that we would always treasure the memories and experiences we shared together.